In October 1915, Frank Hurley stood on Weddell Sea ice beside the sinking HMS Endurance, with 500 glass photographic plates and exactly 1 hour to decide which to keep. He and Shackleton selected 120 and smashed the remaining 400 by hand on the ice. Not because the rejected plates were inferior. Because Shackleton enforced a 2-pound personal weight limit, and Hurley needed to destroy his own work to prove he understood what survival math actually required. Here's what 22 months on Antarctic ice actually cost one photographer, measured in pounds of glass, and the sound broken glass makes when you break it yourself. The 120 plates Hurley saved are the only visual proof the Endurance expedition happened. Without them, 28 men returned from 22 months on ice, with nothing but testimony, which the world reserves the right to doubt. And hey, if stories like this help you drift off, take a second to subscribe. It means everything. You stand on the Weddell Sea ice at 11:47 in the morning, with both hands in your pockets, and 3 pounds of unauthorized weight pressing against your ribs through the canvas of your kit bag. The ice is white, the Endurance behind you is white where the frost has covered the hull, and black where the pressure has split the timbers. The crack runs from the bow to the midship hold, a fracture wider than a man's body, and through it you can see water the color of slate. The ship is sinking in increments. Not dramatically. She settles lower each hour, the deck tilting 3 degrees since dawn, and if you stay here long enough you will watch her go under without spectacle. Just geometry, the angle changing until the masts touch ice. Shackleton stands 20 feet away with his back to you, hands on his hips, facing the wreck. He hasn't moved in 4 minutes. The wind pulls at his jacket. His breath comes in clouds that drift east and vanish. You don't interrupt him. Nobody does. Around you, 27 men are hauling salvage across the ice, in a line that extends from the ship's hold to a growing pile of canvas, rope and tinned provisions stacked on the floe 100 yards south. The work is methodical. Someone calls out weights. Someone else logs them in a notebook that flutters in the wind. The notebook will freeze tonight, and the pages will crack when you turn them, but for now the record is being kept, because Shackleton said to keep it. Your kit bag sits at your feet. Inside, 120 glass plates in their wooden cases, each plate wrapped in felt, each case marked with a number corresponding to the log you keep in your breast pocket. The approved archive. The plates Shackleton selected with you in the flooded hold 14 minutes before the water reached chest height, and he ordered everyone out. Beneath those cases, wrapped in oilcloth, and wedged into the gap between the felt padding and the bag's canvas bottom, is a metal canister the size of a biscuit tin. Inside the canister, 38 glass plates, portraits, individual faces, men who trusted you with their image, and who may not survive to see England again. The canister weighs 3 pounds. Shackleton enforces a 2-pound personal limit, while allowing Hussey his banjo, on the grounds that morale cannot be weighed. The banjo weighs 3 pounds. Shackleton has presumably never been told this. The sound of glass breaking on ice is sharper than you expected, not a crack, a snap. High-pitched and brief. You heard it 400 times in the last hour. Each plate Shackleton handed you from the rejected pile. Each one you held for a moment before dropping it onto the ice at your feet, where it shattered into shapes that caught the light and went dark. Some of the plates showed the crossing from London, the deck in morning fog, sailors coiling rope. Images with no documentary value for the expedition record, but which you took anyway, because a camera in your hands records whether you intend it to or not. Some of the plates showed South Georgia, the whaling station, children standing in doorways, an old man mending nets. Shackleton stood beside you and pointed at those. Not essential, he said. You nodded and broke them. One plate showed McNish in profile, His face turned toward the light coming through a porthole, his expression unreadable. "You held that one longer than the others." Shackleton noticed. He didn't say anything. "You dropped it." The glass broke into 3 large pieces and a scatter of fragments too small to identify. "The 38 plates in the canister are the ones you saved during the 14 minutes you had alone in the hold before Shackleton arrived. You worked fast. Opened cases. Assessed. Selected not by image quality but by a calculus you didn't stop to examine. Which faces matter most if the men attached to them don't come home. You wrapped them in oilcloth. Sealed the canister, hid it in your kit before the first man came down the ladder behind you." Shackleton turns. He looks at the line of men hauling salvage, then at the pile of supplies, then at you. "Hurley?" he says. His voice is level. No urgency in it, just your name. You pick up your kit bag and walk toward him across ice that groans under your boots. A low frequency felt in the chest before it's heard. The sound of a flow adjusting to weight it wasn't designed to carry. He's looking at the ship. "We'll establish camp a mile south," he says. "Far enough that if she goes down tonight, the ice won't take us with her." You nod. "How much weight in the plate cases?" 30 pounds, you say. "Approved archive only." He doesn't ask to verify. He trusts you. The trust sits in your chest next to the 3-pound canister and feels worse than the cold. "Good," he says. He turns and walks toward the supply pile, his boots leaving prints in the frost that are already filling with blown ice by the time you take your first step to follow him. The wind is constant, 40 knots from the southwest. It doesn't gust. Just presses against you with steady force, a hand on your chest pushing you backward while you lean into it and walk forward anyway. You shift the kit bag to your other shoulder, the weight settles differently. The canister presses against your ribs, through the canvas. You've been carrying it for an hour and your body has already learned its shape. The tent city takes shape in rows. 6 tents in 2 lines, each tent staked into ice with iron pins McNish hammered in with the blunt side of an axe. The pins go in 8 inches and hold. For now. The ice is 4 feet thick here, and the surface is stable enough to support weight without fracture. But the flow itself drifts north at a rate Worsley calculated this morning with his sextant and a pocket watch. 1.2 miles per day. You are standing on a piece of the Weddell Sea that is moving toward open water whether you want it to or not. Ocean Camp is the 1915 equivalent of a corporate retreat where the venue is trying to kill you and attendance is mandatory. 28 men hauling canvas across ice, establishing a tent city on a surface that drifts north at 1.2 miles per day. The work takes 4 hours. By the time the last tent is staked, the light has changed. Still white, still bright, but lower, the sun tracking west in a path that skims the horizon without dropping below it. October in the Antarctic means daylight 20 hours out of 24. The other 4 hours are a grey dimness that isn't dark enough to call night but isn't bright enough to work by. You're assigned to Tent 3. Crean and Worsley are your tent mates. Crean is already inside, unpacking his kit onto the ground sheet with the efficiency of a man who has done this before in worse conditions. Worsley sits outside on an overturned crate, writing in a notebook balanced on his knee. Navigation notes. He doesn't look up when you approach. You drop your kit bag inside the tent and crouch to enter. The interior is 8 feet across and 6 feet high at the center pole. Enough space for 3 men to sleep if none of them moves much. The canvas smells new. It's one of the sails salvaged from the Endurance, cut and restitched by McNish into a tent that will hold wind and shed frost but won't hold heat. No tent holds heat here. Heat is something you make with your body, and lose to the air, at a rate that makes sleep a form of continuous work. Crean glances at you. Camera gear. Plate cases, you say. Approved archive. He nods and goes back to organizing his kit. He's separated everything into 3 piles: essential, useful, and discardable. The discardable pile is larger than the other 2. He looks at it for a moment, then picks up a small leather pouch from the top and turns it over in his hands. Inside, a sewing kit, needles and thread wrapped in waxed paper. He opens the pouch, checks the contents, then sets it in the useful pile. You unpack the plate cases and stack them along the tent's back wall, each case positioned flat to distribute weight evenly across the ice below. The cases are wooden, reinforced at the corners with brass fittings that have already started to frost over. You wipe them dry with your sleeve. The frost comes back. The canister stays in the kit bag. You position the bag behind the plate cases, the oilcloth wrapped metal hidden beneath a spare shirt, and a pair of socks you don't need but kept anyway, because Shackleton's £2 limit allows for 1 redundancy per man. Your redundancy is socks. The canister's weight is accounted for as spare plate holders, a lie you told yourself before you told it to anyone else. Outside, someone is lighting a fire, not a real fire, a Primus stove. You hear the hiss of pressurized paraffin igniting, then smell the acrid smoke of seal blubber starting to render in a pan. The smell fills the tent within seconds. Thick, organic, something between burning fat and burning hair. It's the smell of every meal you'll eat for the next 4 months. Worsley enters the tent and sits cross-legged near the door. He's still holding the notebook. He flips to a clean page and writes a single line, then closes the book and tucks it into his jacket. Drift rate's increasing. He says to no one in particular. We'll be at 68 degrees south by tomorrow night. Crean looks up. Closer to open water. Closer to something, Worsley says. You don't ask what the something is. Worsley doesn't speculate. If he doesn't have data, he doesn't have an answer, and if he doesn't have an answer, he doesn't speak. It's a trait you've come to respect. Most men fill silence with guesses. Worsley fills it with calculation. The light outside is dimming, not sunset. Just the sun moving lower, the white ice turning grey at the edges where the pressure ridges cast shadows. You lie back on the ground sheet and feel the cold of the ice rising through the canvas into your spine. It's a cold that doesn't stop. It starts at your back and works inward, into the muscles, into the bones, until your body feels like something that used to be warm and no longer is. Your sleeping bag is beside you, rolled tight and strapped with leather cord. You don't open it yet. The bag is frozen stiff from last night. You slept in it on the ship's deck while the Endurance was still above water, and it will take 5 minutes of body heat pressed against the fabric before it softens enough to climb inside. Crean is already in his bag. He's lying on his side, facing the tent wall, his breath visible in the air above his head. He's not asleep, just still. You close your eyes. The canister is 3 feet away, hidden in a kit bag that 27 men have walked past today without noticing. The weight of it hasn't changed. 3 pounds. The weight of a decision you made in 14 minutes, and will carry for as long as it takes to reach civilization or fail trying. Shackleton announces the inspection at breakfast. This morning, he says. He's standing outside his tent with a tin cup in one hand, steam rising from the tea inside. His voice carries across the camp without strain. Every man, every item. We're counting weight. Nobody objects. Nobody asks why. The why is obvious. You're 28 men, on a drifting ice floe, with finite supplies, and no ship. Weight discipline is the difference between mobility and stasis here is another word for death. You finish your tea. Hot water, tea leaves, condensed milk from a tin that's already half empty, and walk back to tent 3. Crean and Worsley are already inside, laying out their kits on the ground sheet in neat rows. Crean's pile is smaller than yesterday. He's culled again. The discardable items are gone. What remains fits into a space the size of a mailbag. You open your kit and begin unpacking. The plate cases come out first. You stack them beside the tent's center pole, each case aligned with the one beneath it. The weight is visible. 30 pounds of glass and wood. Essential for the expedition record, nobody will question it. The canister stays in the bag. You position a spare shirt on top of it, then add the socks, then a small roll of canvas you've been using as a pillow. The arrangement looks natural. Random. The weight of the canister is distributed beneath items that have justified their presence through use. Shackleton begins the inspection at tent 1. You hear his voice, low and steady, asking questions you can't make out from this distance. Then, silence. Then the sound of items being moved, repacked, set aside. The inspection is methodical. He's not rushing. He's counting. By the time he reaches tent 3, you've been sitting on the ground sheet for 20 minutes with your kit laid out in front of you. Crean is beside you, motionless. Worsley is outside, standing near the tent door, his arms crossed over his chest. Shackleton enters without announcing himself. He looks at Crean's kit first. 12 pounds 4 ounces, Crean says before Shackleton asks. Shackleton nods. He doesn't verify. He moves to Worsley's kit, scans it, then looks at Worsley. Navigation instruments? Sextant, chronometer, charts, Worsley says. 14 pounds even. Shackleton's gaze moves to you. He crouches beside the plate cases and places one hand on the top case, feeling its weight without lifting it. Camera equipment? Approved archive, you say. 30 pounds in plate cases. He looks at your kit bag. What's the rest? Spare plate holders, you say. Essential for protecting the approved archive during transport. The lie is in your mouth before you think it. The words come out level. No hesitation. You meet his eyes and hold them. He picks up the kit bag. The weight shifts. The canister inside presses against the canvas and you see his hand adjust, feeling the shape of something solid beneath the fabric. 3 pounds 4 ounces, he says. You nod. He sets the bag down and stands. McNish next, he says, and exits the tent. The inspection lasts another 10 minutes. By the time Shackleton moves to the next tent, every man in tent 3 has been weighed and accounted for. The total is written in his notebook, a number that represents the maximum load 28 men can carry if the ice breaks and the boats become the only option. You repack your kit in silence. The canister goes back into its position beneath the spare shirt. The weight of it hasn't changed. Neither has the fact that if Shackleton had opened the bag instead of weighing it, the expedition would now be 27 men, and you'd be walking back toward the wreck of the Endurance with your gear, and no reasonable expectation of survival. Crean is watching you. He doesn't say anything, just looks at your kit bag for a moment, then looks away. Outside, the wind has picked up, 50 knots now. The tent canvas snaps and pulls at the stakes. Somewhere in the camp, someone is securing loose items. You hear the sound of rope being tied, the metallic clink of a carabiner closing. Scientific equipment is abandoned first, which makes sense if you understand that survival and science have different relationships with the concept of future utility. Science assumes someone will be alive later to read the results. Shackleton has made no such assumption. You lie back on the ground sheet and close your eyes. The canister is still there. 3 pounds of glass that survived 1 inspection, and will need to survive 4 more, before you reach open water. The ice groans beneath the tent, a low frequency, felt before heard. The sound of pressure building somewhere in the flow's structure. A crack forming, a seam opening, the geometry of frozen water adjusting to forces it can't contain. You don't open your eyes. You've heard that sound every night since the Endurance became locked in ice. It doesn't mean the flow is breaking, it just means the flow is moving. Everything here is moving. The ice drifts north, the ship sinks south, the men wait in between. The waiting is the work now. Morning means cold that locks your muscles before you're awake. The sleeping bag is frozen stiff around you. Reindeer hide turned to stone overnight. You lie still. 5 minutes of body heat to soften the material enough to move. Your breath condenses inside the bag, freezes against the inner surface, adds weight. The process repeats every night. By February, the bag will weigh twice what it did in November. The sleeping bag freezes solid overnight. Each morning requires 5 minutes of body heat to soften it enough to exit, which is the 1915 equivalent of your laptop deciding it needs 17 critical updates before you can check your email. Except the laptop doesn't determine whether you get frostbite. You extract yourself in stages. Shoulders first, then hips. The hide releases you with small tearing sounds. Outside, the ice is groaning, not loud, felt in the chest before heard in the ears. Frequency too low for comfort. The camp sits on a floe 3 miles across, drifting north at a rate Worsley calculated yesterday as 1.2 miles per day. You stand beside the tent and listen to the icework. Compression somewhere to the west. The sound travels through solid matter faster than through air, reaches your boots before your ears. Another groan, deeper this time. The ice is never still. Worsley emerges from the next tent with his sextant case. He doesn't look at you. His eyes track the horizon, checking for leads. Open water channels that appear when pressure ridges crack. He's been doing this every morning since Ocean Camp was established. 3 weeks now, no leads yet. Drifts holding steady, he says, not to you, to the air, to himself. You nod. He returns to his tent. The conversation is complete. The wind shifts, brings the smell of seal blubber smoke from the cooking tent. Beneath it, something sharper. The metallic edge of extreme cold against canvas, against rope, against the wooden sledge runners propped beside McNish's shelter. You've learned to read the air here. Temperature drops smell different than temperature holding steady. This is the latter. The canister is where you left it, wrapped in canvas at the bottom of your kit bag beneath the plate cases. 3 pounds. Shackleton's inspection yesterday missed it or ignored it. You're not sure which possibility is worse. You think of the 22 men left behind on Elephant Island. They have fewer tents, less fuel, the same wind. Shackleton chose the strongest for the boat journey. The weakest remain, waiting. The photographs in the canister include some of their faces, documentation of men who may not be documented anywhere else if this fails. The ice groans again, closer this time. You make tea. The thermometer outside McNish's tent reads -30 degrees. Your nasal passages ache with each breath. The cold is a physical presence in your sinuses, sharp enough to make your eyes water. Inside the tent, seal blubber burns in the Primus stove. The smoke is acrid, saturates the canvas until the fabric itself smells like rendered fat. You've stopped noticing after the first hour. The others have stopped mentioning it. McNish works in the corner, modifying a section of the James Card's keel, using timber salvaged from the Endurance before she went down. His hands move with absolute certainty, no hesitation, no second guessing. The wood is frozen, he works it anyway. Needs another 6 inches of reinforcement, he says. To the wood, not to you, storm shear will crack it otherwise. You watch him fit the piece, perfect angle. No gap. McNish modifies the James Caird using salvaged timber, and a profound disregard for the opinion of anyone who isn't currently trapped on Antarctic ice. His carpentry has the confidence of a man who knows the boat either works or everyone dies, which simplifies the design review process considerably. You'll take it across open ocean, you say. He doesn't look up. If it comes to that, it'll come to that. Then the reinforcement matters. He sets down the piece, examines the joint. Satisfied. Storm shear doesn't negotiate. The tent fabric snaps once in the wind. A sharp sound, like a rifle crack at distance. McNish doesn't flinch. His attention stays on the wood grain, the angle of stress, the probable failure point under load. You recognize the expression. The same focus you bring to exposure calculations when the light is failing and there's one plate left. Outside, someone is splitting ice blocks for fresh water. The axe strikes follow a rhythm. 2 fast cuts, 1 deep, pause, repeat. Green Street's pattern. You've learned to identify men by their toolwork. Confined space makes everyone legible. You return to your own work. The glass plates are temperature sensitive. Exposure to sudden warmth after prolonged cold causes fracture, microscopic cracks that ruin the image. You've developed a handling protocol. Remove 1 plate at a time from the case. Allow 30 seconds of gradual warming in your hands before examination. Return it before removing the next. It takes an hour to inspect 10 plates. McNish finishes his work and leaves without comment. The tent is yours for the moment. You check the canister. Still secure. Still hidden. The weight is familiar now, part of your body's carried mass. The families waiting in England have no idea yet. The Endurance was supposed to send a wireless message from the Weddell Sea coast last March. Silence for 9 months now. At some point, hope curdles into assumption. You carry proof that the men were alive, were working, were real. Whether that proof reaches anyone depends on McNish's joinery and Worsley's navigation, and your ability to keep 3 pounds hidden through whatever comes next. Outside, the temperature holds at -30. The ice groans its continuous low complaint. You brew more tea and wait for the next inspection, the next drift calculation, the next morning, when the sleeping bag will freeze solid, and you'll spend 5 minutes convincing it to release you. The smoke from the primus hangs in the tent like a presence. You breathe it. You've stopped noticing. The aurora appears after midnight. Green curtains across the southern horizon, the only movement in a world that has forgotten motion. You set up the camera outside your tent. Long exposure photography in these conditions is barely functional. The shutter mechanism freezes if you're not careful. Oil in the aperture ring turns to paste below -20. You've learned to keep the camera inside your coat until the moment of use, then work fast. The aurora ripples. Folds of light that have no business existing in a place this cold. You frame the shot. Tent line in the foreground for scale. Ice shelf middle distance. Aurora filling the upper half of the frame. Exposure time, 40 seconds. You trigger the shutter and count. The aurora appears in green curtains across the southern horizon, which would be beautiful if you weren't primarily worried about whether the camera shutter will freeze mid-exposure. Beauty and documentation have different relationships with temperature. At 38 seconds, the shutter releases. You cap the lens immediately. Return the camera to your coat. The plate will need careful development. Ice crystals may have formed on the emulsion during exposure. You won't know until you process it. If you process it. The wind dies. The silence afterward is absolute. No tent flutter, no ice groan, no footsteps from the camp. Just your breathing and the residual warmth of the camera against your ribs. You've experienced silence before. In libraries. In dark rooms. In early morning London before the carts start. This is different. This is the silence of a place that was never meant to hold sound. It doesn't absorb noise, it negates it. You think about the historical record. If the glass plates are lost, the ones in the cases, and the ones in the canister, there's no visual evidence the expedition happened. Ship's logs can be disputed. Memories distort. A photograph is harder to argue with. It says, this person stood here, this light fell this way, this moment was real. The hidden canister presses against your ribs, through the canvas wrap. 38 faces that serve no documentary purpose. 38 men who might not make it home. You made a choice in the flooding hold of the Endurance. Some images matter more than their weight. Someone coughs in the nearest tent. Wild, probably. His cough has a particular wet quality from the frostbite damage to his lungs. The sound breaks the silence and the world resumes its small motions. Canvas shifting, ice settling. The aurora fades, the green curtains collapse back into darkness. You stand on the ice and watch the last light disappear. Documentation of beauty, documentation of survival. Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're opposed. You're a photographer who understands that distinction and who has made decisions about it that you'll think about for the rest of your life. The ice groans. The aurora is gone. You return to your tent with the camera still warm against your chest, and one more image that might justify its existence, if you can keep it from fracturing before you reach land. Shackleton calls the order at breakfast, which means it isn't a suggestion. 2 pounds personal kit, everything else goes on the ice. You have 3 pounds of unauthorized weight in a canister that officially doesn't exist. The inspection happens in 4 hours. The thermometer reads -28. Wind pushes canvas against tent poles hard enough that the poles creak. McNish is outside your tent with his axe, splitting seal blubber into portions that will burn long enough to boil water. The rhythm is steady. 3 strikes, pause, 3 strikes. The blubber doesn't split cleanly at this temperature, it fractures. You open your kit and count what you're carrying. 1 spare shirt, 1 notebook. The shaving kit Shackleton mandated because morale requires grooming discipline, even when survival margins are narrowing to the width of a hardtack ration. The camera body. The 120 approved plates in their cases. The hidden canister beneath the second case, positioned so its weight distributes evenly enough that lifting the cases doesn't reveal the asymmetry. 3 pounds over limit. If you abandon the spare shirt and the notebook, you're still 2 pounds over. The shaving kit weighs 4 ounces. That leaves 1 pound 18 ounces unaccounted for. And Shackleton's inspections involve lifting each man's kit to verify compliance. Worsley emerges from the tent he shares with Wild. He's carrying a sextant case and a wooden box that probably contains his navigation tables. He sets both on the ice beside the tent, then goes back inside. When he returns, he's carrying a pair of boots. Good leather. Barely worn. He places them beside the sextant case, and walks toward Shackleton's tent without looking back. The boots stay on the ice. You repack the kit, with the canister positioned directly beneath the folded shirt, then place the plate cases on top. The shirt provides enough padding that the canister's edges don't press visibly through the canvas. You lift the kit. The weight is wrong. Too heavy by exactly the margin that will register when Shackleton lifts it. But the balance is correct. If you can position yourself so he lifts from the center, not the edges, the distribution might pass. Crean walks past your tent carrying a wool sweater. He doesn't fold it. He drops it on the ice 10 feet from his tent, then keeps walking toward the supply dump where the seal meat is stored. The sweater sits there in the wind. You count 12 items on the ice by the time Shackleton begins the inspection. Personal items that weighed too much or mattered too little. A second pair of gloves. A tobacco tin. A book with a leather cover that will freeze and crack within the week. Shackleton starts at the far tent. You watch him lift each kit, hold it for 3 seconds, then set it down and move to the next man. No commentary. No questions. When a kit passes, he nods. When it doesn't, he points at the ice beside the tent. The man removes items until Shackleton nods. He reaches your tent in 18 minutes. You hand him the kit, he lifts it, holds it, you count 4 seconds. Camera mechanisms, he asks. In the sleeping bag, you say, body temperature. They freeze solid otherwise. He nods and sets the kit down, moves to the next tent. The canister stays hidden. You don't move until he's finished the entire inspection. When he walks back toward his tent, you repack the kit and place it inside. The wind is 40 knots now. Canvas snaps against the poles with a sound like rifle reports. Worsley's boots are still on the ice when you come out for the evening meal. Nobody has touched them. The ice moves north at 1.1 miles per day. Camp doesn't move at all. You wake to the same canvas overhead, the same cold against your spine, through 3 layers of wool and fur. The same sound of McNish's axe working through frozen seal meat outside. The temperature is -32. Yesterday it was -29. The trend is wrong. Winter is arriving, not leaving, but the routine doesn't acknowledge this. Breakfast is hoosh. Seal meat boiled in snowmelt until the fat separates and floats in grey circles on the surface. 1 biscuit of hardtack per man, rationed from the stores salvaged before endurance went down. The biscuit is 3 inches square, with the structural integrity of a roof tile. You soften it in the hoosh until it absorbs enough liquid to chew without breaking teeth. Shackleton eats with the men. This hasn't changed. He sits on a provision case near the main fire and drinks from the same mug as everyone else. Dented tin, no handle, marked with soot from being set too close to blubber flames. When Wilde asks about the drift rate, Shackleton gives him the number without inflection. 67 miles total since we made camp. Current puts us at 68 degrees south, 52 west. Closer to open water, someone asks. Closer to where open water might be in 4 months. The conversation ends there. You spend the morning maintaining camera equipment. The body sits in your sleeping bag at night to prevent the shutter mechanism from freezing solid. During the day you check the aperture blades, the film advance, the lever seals around the plate holder. Every component has a failure temperature, and you're operating near the threshold of all of them simultaneously. The 120 approved plates are stored in their cases beneath your tent's provision pile. The unauthorized canister remains wrapped in your spare shirt, which is no longer spare because you're wearing every piece of clothing you kept during the second weight reduction. The canister's weight is permanent now. No inspection will find it, but you'll carry it until the ice breaks or the food runs out. At midday, Hurley emerges from his tent with the other camera. He sets up near the main fire and photographs the blubber stove, the provision cases, the line of tents stretching across the floe. His movements are efficient. He doesn't frame shots. He records them. The shutter clicks 4 times. Then he packs the camera and goes back inside. You count the days by tasks. Monday is kit inspection. Everyone displays their 2 pounds of personal items, while Shackleton walks the line and nods or points at the ice. Tuesday is fuel inventory. McNish counts the seal blubber portions and reports the total to Wilde, who writes it in a ledger that tracks consumption against estimated drift time to open water. Wednesday is navigation. Worsley takes a sun sighting if the clouds break, calculates position, and updates the map he keeps in a wooden tube that never leaves his sight. Days are measured by cold management and food preparation, which creates a temporal structure where time exists but progress doesn't. You are moving north at 1.1 miles per day while going nowhere, which is either profound or just what ice does. Thursday you photograph the horizon. The ice extends in every direction without variation. White under grey sky, broken only by pressure ridges, where flows collided and froze into formations that look like city walls built by something that doesn't understand geometry. You take 3 plates. The light is flat enough that exposure times run long, and you have to anchor the tripod against wind that wants to push everything toward the water you can't see. Crean works beside the main fire, cutting seal meat into portions. His hands are wrapped in canvas strips, because the gloves he kept during weight reduction don't cover his fingers completely. The meat is frozen hard enough that the knife skates across the surface, until he finds a seam where muscle fiber separated during the freezing process. Then the knife sinks in, and he levers the portion free. How much left, you ask? 18 days, Crean says, if we don't increase rations. If we do, 12. You don't ask what happens after 12 days. Everyone knows the answer. The seals are gone. The open water is 4 months away. The arithmetic is clear. At night, the wind rises to 50 knots. Canvas hammers against tent poles with a rhythm that makes sleep difficult until exhaustion overrides the noise. You lie in your sleeping bag with a camera body against your ribs and count the days since endurance sank. 47. The ice is 18 feet thick beneath your tent. It moves north while you sleep, carrying you toward water that might appear before the food runs out, or might not. The decision isn't yours. The 22 men on Elephant Island are waiting for rescue that depends on someone reaching South Georgia. And South Georgia is 800 miles across the worst ocean on Earth. You don't think about the families waiting in England. You think about the canister hidden in your shirt, the plates that will matter if you survive and mean nothing if you don't. Outside, McNish's axe strikes blubber in the dark. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits. The routine holds. The ice cracks at 0300. Not beneath the camp, 200 yards east, where the flow meets a pressure ridge that's been stable since you made camp 49 days ago. The sound is sharp enough to wake everyone. You hear canvas moving in the other tents, then Shackleton's voice cutting through the wind. Stay inside. Wild Worsley Crean, with me. You don't move. The tent fabric snaps against the poles while you listen to boots on ice, moving away from camp toward the source of the crack. No one speaks. The wind is 40 knots and rising. 4 minutes pass. Then Shackleton's voice again, closer now. Back to sleep. Cracks 100 yards out, not propagating. The boots retreat. Canvas stops moving in the other tents. You stay awake and count the minutes until the next crack, but it doesn't come. At breakfast, Wild reports the assessment. The flow lost 30 feet of its eastern edge where the crack opened into a lead, a channel of black water that wasn't there yesterday. The remaining ice is stable. Camp stays where it is. How thick is stable, someone asks. 18 feet at the center, Wild says. 12 at the new edge. No one asks if 12 feet is enough. The question isn't useful. You spend the morning checking tent anchors. Each tent is secured to the ice with stakes driven 2 feet down and tied off with rope that's inspected every 72 hours. The stakes near the eastern edge of camp are 15 feet from the new lead. You measure the distance with a knotted rope, count the knots, and report the number to Wild, who writes it in his ledger beside Tuesday's fuel inventory and Wednesday's navigation plot. The lead is 8 feet wide. Water moves inside it with a current you can see from the surface. Black water pushing north faster than the ice, which means the pack is loosening somewhere ahead. This is either good or irrelevant depending on how much the flow deteriorates before the food runs out. McNish is at the lead's edge with a sounding line. He drops the weighted end into the water and pays out rope until it goes slack, pulls it back up, and measures the wet section against a knotted cord he keeps in his kit. 340 feet, he says. You don't ask what sits at 340 feet. The answer is the ocean floor, which doesn't affect survival except as a reminder that the ice is temporary and the water beneath it is not. Hurley photographs the lead from 6 angles. He sets up the tripod, takes the shot, moves 12 feet and repeats. His breath clouds the viewfinder between exposures, and he has to wipe the glass with a rag that's cleaner than anything else in camp, because lens care matters more than hygiene when the historical record depends on image clarity. You take one plate, the lead cutting through white ice with the pressure ridge behind it and the gray sky overhead. The composition is clean. 3 horizontal bands of tone without distraction. You mark the plate canister with a pencil notation. Flow integrity, 03 November *. Then store it with the others beneath the provision pile. At midday, the wind shifts to the southwest. Temperature drops to -36. Shackleton orders a fuel ration increase. 2 extra portions of seal blubber per day for the main stove, which means the 18-day supply Crean calculated yesterday is now a 14-day supply. Frostbite cases are increasing, Shackleton says. Cold management takes priority over food extension. No one argues. 3 men are already showing blackened tissue on their fingers where canvas wrapping failed during work details. The choice is between eating longer and keeping enough fingers to handle rope when the boats launch. You spend the afternoon inside the tent, testing the camera shutter at low temperature. The mechanism is sluggish. Each release takes half a second longer than it should, which means exposure times are drifting outside calibration. You adjust the tension spring with a jeweler's tool from the repair kit, cycle the shutter 20 times and test again. The delay shortens to a quarter second. Close enough. Worsley comes by at 1600 with the daily position report. He doesn't enter the tent, just crouches outside the flap and reads the numbers from a scrap of paper he keeps folded in his navigation case. 67 degrees 41 minutes south, 52 degrees 18 minutes west. Drift rate is holding at 1 mile per day. Open water estimate, you ask? Mid-March, if the pack breaks on schedule. If it doesn't. Worsley folds the paper and tucks it back in the case. Then the estimate changes. He's gone before you can ask what it changes to. At evening meal, the hoosh is thinner than yesterday, same portion of seal meat, more water. The mathematics are adjusting in real time. Stretch the supply by reducing density, which keeps the meal count stable while decreasing caloric intake per serving. No one mentions this. Everyone notices. You eat slowly and watch the lead. It hasn't widened since morning, but the water inside it is moving faster. Small chunks of brash ice tumble north in the current, spinning as they go. The motion is visible from camp, which means the current is strong enough to matter. Harry McNish's reputation depends on 3 boats staying intact until they reach open water. If the Dudley Docker's hull fails in surf, 22 men die, and McNish's name gets listed in maritime records under "Tor inadequate craftsmanship during emergency repair." He knows this. You know he knows this, because he's outside his tent every night with a blubber lamp, inspecting the seams he recorked with lampwick and seal blood. Tonight he's at the bow section, running his fingers along the keel joint where the planks meet. His hands move slowly, checking for gaps by touch, in light too dim for visual inspection. When he finds a seam that feels wrong, he marks it with a pencil, then moves to the next section. You watch him work until the lamp burns out. Then you go back inside your tent and lie down with the camera body against your ribs. The ice cracks again at 0200. Farther away this time, maybe a quarter mile south. You listen for Shackleton's voice, but it doesn't come. The crack isn't close enough to matter yet. The first shot comes at 9 in the morning. You're 50 yards from the kill site when you hear it, a flat crack that doesn't echo because there's nothing to stop it. The sound moves across the ice in a straight line and keeps going. McNish is doing the work. Crean assists. The dogs that remain are quiet in their traces, which means they understand what the sound means, or they're too cold to care. Shackleton made the announcement at breakfast. 6 words. We're reducing the dog teams today. Nobody asked which dogs. The men who raised them from puppies on the ship knew the answer before the question formed. You don't photograph this. The decision isn't sentiment. It's arithmetic that stopped adding up 3 days ago when Worsley recalculated the ice drift and determined the flow is moving northeast at a rate that puts rescue further away, not closer. The dogs eat seal meat. The men eat seal meat. There isn't enough seal meat for both, and dogs don't pull sleds when they're starving. The second shot follows 90 seconds after the first. You're repacking the camera cases when it happens. The canister sits beneath the folded shirt where you placed it this morning. its weight familiar enough now that your hands know how to position everything above it without checking. 3 pounds distributed across the kit's interior, so that nothing shifts when Shackleton lifts it. The dogs are shot in stages as food calculations fail. The men who raised them from puppies perform the task without discussion, which is either profound stoicism, or what happens when all the reasonable alternatives have been exhausted, and only the unreasonable mathematics remain. McNish returns to camp an hour later. He sets the rifle outside Shackleton's tent without comment, then goes to work on the sled runners that need reinforcement before the next move. His hands are steady. The work is precise. He measures twice, cuts once, fits the brace against the damaged section and hammers it into place with strikes that follow the same rhythm he's used since you made camp. You make tea. The thermometer reads -22, the wind has dropped to nothing, which means the cold settles instead of moving. You pour the tea, and watch the steam rise in a column that holds its shape for 3 seconds before dispersing. Crean emerges from his tent and walks to where McNish is working. They don't speak. Crean picks up the second hammer and begins work on the opposite runner. The strikes alternate, McNish's pattern followed by Crean's, then McNish again. It's not coordination. It's 2 men doing the same task in the same space, who've learnt not to get in each other's way. The remaining dogs are fed at noon, smaller portions than yesterday. They eat without hesitation, which means hunger has replaced preference as the governing principle. You position the camera on the ice and document the camp's arrangement. 6 tents, 2 supply dumps, 3 sleds positioned in a line that points northwest. The image will show organization. It won't show the morning's work. That's not the kind of documentation Shackleton contracted you to provide. And it's not the kind you're carrying in the hidden canister either. The plates you kept, the unauthorized 38, are portraits. Individual men, documented before the ice became the only fact that mattered. Their faces recorded in better light, in moments when cold was temporary, and England was a destination instead of a theory. The families waiting in England will need those faces. You photographed McNish before his hands learned this particular mathematics. You photographed Wild before Elephant Island became a name that mattered. You don't know if any of those men are still alive. You don't know if the canister will survive long enough to deliver those images to anyone who needs them. What you know is that McNish shot 6 dogs this morning because the food won't stretch, and he did it without discussion, because discussion doesn't change arithmetic. The weight you're carrying serves no survival function. Shackleton would call it liability. You've chosen to call it something else, and the gap between those definitions is the space where you've been living since the ship went down. The afternoon is work. You help Worsley take sextant readings that confirm the drift rate. Northeast. Still wrong. Still steady. He records the numbers in his log, with the same notation he's used for 63 days. The cold has deepened by the time you return to your tent. The canister is exactly where you left it. The boat's name is James Caird. 22 feet of timber and canvas that left Elephant Island with 6 men and supplies, calculated to last 30 days, if the wind holds, and the course stays true. You are not on the boat. You are on the beach, with the 22 men who remain, watching the sail shrink against the horizon until it becomes a theory instead of a fact. Wild stands at the waterline until the boat disappears completely. Then he turns and walks back to camp without comment. The men who are standing with him follow. Nobody speaks because there's nothing to say that isn't obvious. The count is simple now. 22 men. 4 months of supplies if the seals keep coming. 1 upturned boat for shelter. 1 stove. No radio. No ship. No certainty that the James Caird will reach South Georgia. And less certainty that anyone will return if it does. You unpack the camera. The light is wrong. Flat overcast that turns everything the same shade of grey, but you document the camp anyway. The upturned boat that serves as shelter. The supply dump covered with salvaged canvas. The rocky beach that represents the only solid ground any of you have stood on in 16 months. The historical record requires this image. If the plates are lost, there will be no evidence that any of this happened. Wild organizes the first work detail an hour after the boat leaves. "We're building walls," he says. "Rock walls around the shelter, 2 feet high, 3 feet thick. We start now." The men move without hesitation. They've been following orders long enough that the pattern holds even when the officer giving them has no authority, except the authority Shackleton left behind when he climbed into the James Caird and pointed it at an island 700 miles northeast. You photograph the work. The rocks are volcanic, black basalt that breaks into angular chunks when struck with the right force. The men work in pairs, one levering stones loose from the beach, the other hauling them to the growing wall. It's the same division of labor you've watched for months: McNish and Crean, Macklin and McElroy, Greenstreet and Kerr. Hands that know each other's rhythm. The temperature is 28 degrees. The wind carries moisture that settles on exposed skin and freezes there. You work the camera with gloves on, which makes the aperture adjustment difficult but not impossible. The shutter clicks. The plate advances. You don't know if this image will matter to anyone, but you know it's the only record being made. Wild inspects the wall at noon. He doesn't comment on the construction. He checks the joints where stones meet, testing for stability with his boot. 3 spots need reinforcement. He marks them with a piece of charcoal and moves on. The first meal without Shackleton is seal meat and biscuit. The portions are the same as yesterday. Wild divides the rations with the same precision Shackleton used, weighing each piece on the scale before distribution. Nobody mentions the absence. Nobody needs to. You eat slowly, making the portion last. The meat is tough, and the biscuit is harder, but your body needs the calories and preference stopped being a factor weeks ago. Across the shelter, Macklin eats with the same mechanical efficiency. His hands shake slightly, cold or exhaustion or both. He finishes, sets the plate aside, and immediately lies down. The afternoon is more wall building. The rocks are heavier now, or your arms are weaker, probably both. You set the camera aside and join Kerr's detail, hauling stones from the beach to the growing barrier. The work is simple: lift, carry, position, return. Your hands learn the weight. Your back learns the angle. The count becomes automatic. 12 stones per hour, 96 stones before darkness makes the work impossible. Wild calls a halt at 4 o'clock. The wall is half finished, which means tomorrow's work is already defined. Same detail at first light, he says. Eat, sleep, stay dry. You clean the camera before you eat. Salt spray has left residue on the lens. You wipe it carefully with a cloth kept dry for this purpose, checking the glass for scratches that would ruin every subsequent exposure. The lens is intact. The body shows no cracks. The plate holder advances smoothly when tested. Everything functions exactly as it should, which means the equipment is more reliable than the circumstances. The canister sits in your kit beneath the same folded shirt. 3 pounds of glass plates that document faces photographed months ago, under conditions that no longer exist. You've carried this weight across ice, across open water, across a beach that represents the edge of everything. Wild would call it dead weight. Harry McNish's reputation, if he survives, depends partly on images you made before his hands learned this particular carpentry. You've chosen to call it something else. The wind picks up after dark. It carries the smell of the sea and something else. Rot, maybe, or old kelp exposed at low tide. You lie in the shelter and listen to men breathe. 22 separate rhythms, some steady, some broken by coughing that won't stop. This is the sound of waiting. This is what remains when the boat leaves, and the only direction is patience. You don't sleep immediately. Your hands still remember the weight of the stones. Your shoulders remember the angle of the carry. The work will continue tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until the boat returns, or doesn't. The arithmetic is simple. 4 months of supplies, 700 miles of ocean, 6 men in a 22-foot boat that was never designed for open water. The historical record will need this chapter. You're making sure it survives. Shackleton inspects the equipment every third day. It's not suspicion. It's inventory management learned from expeditions that failed because someone assumed supplies were present that turned out to have been lost, stolen or ruined by moisture weeks earlier. You've watched him check McNish's tools, Worsley's navigation instruments, Crean's medical supplies. The pattern is always the same. Methodical examination, quiet count, notation in the log he keeps inside his jacket. This morning it's your turn. He arrives at your tent without announcement. "Camera kit," he says. "Let's see it." You open the case. The equipment is arranged exactly as it was yesterday. Body, lenses, plate holders, the maintenance cloth, folded into the corner. The canister sits beneath the shirt, where you placed it 4 days ago. Shackleton's eyes move across the contents in the same pattern he uses for everything. Top to bottom, left to right, checking for absence rather than presence. "Plates?" he asks. 32 holders, you say. 16 plates. The rest were lost when the ship went down. He doesn't ask about the lost plates. He's already written them off. His hand moves toward the plate holders, then stops. He looks at you instead. "You're rationing these?" "Yes." "How many exposures do you have left?" "Enough for the return journey, you say, if we make good time." The answer is true enough that it doesn't require elaboration. Shackleton nods and closes the case himself. "Keep them dry," he says. "We'll need documentation when we reach South Georgia." He leaves before you respond. You wait 30 seconds, then check the canister. Still there, still hidden. Still carrying weight that serves no survival function unless survival includes the version of this expedition that gets recorded after everyone is dead or safe. The second inspection happens 6 days later. You're prepared this time. The canister's position hasn't changed, but you've rearranged the shirt above it so the fold line runs perpendicular, instead of parallel to the case's edge. It's a small detail. It's the kind of detail that suggests normal use rather than deliberate concealment. Shackleton opens the case and performs the same examination, top to bottom. Left to right. His hand hovers over the plate holders for 3 seconds longer than last time. Then he closes the case and nods. 16 plates, he says. 16 plates, you confirm. He leaves. You exhale. The third kit inspection follows the same pattern as the first two, which means either Shackleton hasn't noticed the canister, or he's noticed and is waiting to see what you do with it. Neither possibility is particularly comforting. The question you're not asking, does he know? The question you're also not asking, if he knows, why hasn't he said anything? The gap between those questions is where you've been living since the ship went down. It's the space between orders and judgment, between the expedition Shackleton contracted you to document, and the one you're documenting anyway. He hired you to make him look competent. You're doing that. You're also making sure the men who didn't survive incompetence get recorded with the same precision. You repack the kit after the third inspection. The canister goes back beneath the shirt. The shirt folds the same way it folded yesterday. Your hands perform the work without conscious thought, which means the deception has become routine enough to survive on muscle memory. Wild organizes another work detail. More wall building. More stone hauling. The count continues. Rocks per hour, hours per day, days since the James Caird left. You join Kerr's detail because the work keeps your hands busy, and busy hands don't think about kit inspections, or hidden canisters, or the question Shackleton didn't ask. At the waterline, Macklin and McElroy are processing a seal. The animal is already dead, killed an hour ago when it surfaced too close to camp. They work with the efficiency of men who've done this task 100 times. Cut, separate, portion, distribute. The meat will feed 22 men for 3 days if rationed correctly. The blubber will burn in the stove. The bones will be saved for tools McNish hasn't invented yet but probably will. You don't photograph this. Shackleton would call it waste of plates. You agree. But you watch anyway, because watching is what you do, and because the men processing the seal are performing surgery that keeps 22 other men alive for 72 more hours. The wind shifts at noon. It's coming from the northwest now, which means weather. Wilde checks the sky and makes a decision. Finish the current row, he says. Then secure the supplies and get inside. The men move faster. The rocks that took 2 minutes to position now take 90 seconds. It's not panic. It's acceleration born from experience with weather that kills men who don't take it seriously. You help Kerr lift a stone into place, then move to the next one. The wall grows. The wind grows with it. By the time you're inside the shelter, the first snow is falling. It's not heavy yet, but the weight is coming. You can feel it in the air pressure, in the way the wind moves, in the silence that precedes storms in this part of the world. The canister sits in your kit 30 feet away, 3 pounds of glass that might survive if the shelter holds, might shatter if it doesn't. You've made your choice. You're carrying the weight. The only question left is whether the weight reaches England or stays here, buried under ice that will outlast every decision you've ever made. Shackleton weighs the plate cases again on the 14th day. You maintain the same explanation about spare holders. He nods. He doesn't ask to see inside them. He never has. Worsley stands 30 yards from camp with the sextant braced against his chest. You watch him through the gap between tents. He's been out there 11 minutes. The sun sits low enough to use but high enough that the horizon stays visible. 4 seconds of observation time if the conditions hold. Less if they don't. He lowers the instrument, writes something in the notebook he keeps inside his coat, raises the sextant again. You cross the distance between you. Your boots crack through surface ice that formed overnight. The sound carries further than it should in air this cold. Position fix, Worsley says without turning. His breath fogs white and dissipates. Third attempt. First 2 readings disagreed by half a mile. The sextant arc catches light. He adjusts the index arm with movements so small you wouldn't see them if you weren't standing this close. Hold, he says. 4 seconds. The sun on the horizon. The measurement window so narrow that blinking costs you the shot. He lowers the instrument, writes again. This time he closes the notebook. 1.3 miles north since yesterday, Worsley said. You walk with him back to camp. Shackleton stands outside the command tent with a tin cup in one hand. Steam rises from whatever's inside. Tea, probably. Or soup that used to be tea before someone added seal fat to stretch it. Worsley stops 3 feet from him, opens the notebook to the last entry. Shackleton reads without taking the book. His eyes track the numbers. Calculation visible in the pause between reading and response. 1.3 miles north since yesterday, Worsley said. Shackleton nodded. Noted, he said. Worsley closes the notebook. Returns it to his coat. The whole exchange took less time than brewing tea. The wind shifts from the southeast. It brings the smell of open water, salt and something organic that doesn't exist where everything stays frozen. The scent is faint, a promise the ice hasn't authorized yet. You turn your face into it anyway. 22 men remain on Elephant Island. Wilde commands them. Last confirmed position, 61 degrees south, 55 degrees west. They have 4 months of reduced rations. No boat. No means of leaving unless someone returns for them. The arithmetic is clear. You drift north, or they wait forever. You return to your tent. The canister sits where it always sits, beneath the shirt, under the plate cases, in the kit that passed inspection 43 hours ago. The math is simple. 1.3 miles per day. Open water estimated at 90 miles north. 69 days if the rate holds. Longer if it slows. Shorter if the ice accelerates. The plates weigh what they've always weighed. 3 pounds of metal and glass that document faces Shackleton, never authorized you to preserve. The drift carries them north whether you hide them or not. The ice doesn't distinguish between approved weight and prohibited sentiment. You check the canister positioning one more time, not because anything has shifted, because checking has become the rhythm that replaces certainty. Worsley's numbers sit in Shackleton's log now, 1.3 miles. Noted, the gap between observation and action, exactly as wide as the distance ice, requires you to cross. The Primus stove burns seal blubber, because there's nothing else left to burn. The smoke rises yellow-grey and hangs in the tent fabric until the fabric becomes smoke itself. You've stopped opening the vent flap. Opening it means losing heat. Keeping it closed means breathing what used to be a seal. McNish tends the stove. His hands work the fuel valve with the precision of a carpenter who learned to measure by touch. Too much fuel, and the flame goes black. Too little, and it dies. The margin between the two is narrower than the gap between staying warm and losing fingers. Rotation in 6 minutes, he says. The meal prep runs in shifts now. 28 men, 7 tents, 4 minutes per tent if nobody wastes time. You're in the 3rd rotation, which means you eat after McNish but before Crean. The order matters less than the fact that there is an order. The pot on the stove holds something that started as pemmican and became soup after someone added snow. The smell should register as food. Instead it registers as blubber smoke with pemmican somewhere underneath. All clothing is saturated with seal blubber smoke after 3 months. The smell stops registering as a smell and becomes the baseline sensory experience, which is either olfactory adaptation or your nose giving up. Biology doesn't clarify which. You check your coat sleeve. The wool holds smoke the way cotton holds water, completely, permanently, with no intention of releasing it. If you returned to London wearing this coat, people would smell you before they saw you. The ice has a scent now. It's this. McNish lifts the pot, pours into the first cup. The liquid is grey and moves like something thicker than water but thinner than stew. He hands you the cup without comment. You drink. The heat matters more than the taste. The taste has been the same for 67 days. Outside someone coughs. The sound is wet. It carries through canvas the smoke has made thin. You don't recognize the voice but you recognize the cough. 3 men have it now. The cold works from the outside in. The smoke works from the inside out. The body is caught between. Crean enters the tent, takes his position by the stove. McNish refills the pot from the snow bucket. The routine continues, because stopping means making decisions about whether to continue, and nobody has energy for decisions that don't involve staying alive. Your cup empties. You set it beside the stove. McNish will clean it later, or you will, or someone will. The rotation doesn't specify. It only specifies that the cup returns to the cleaning cycle before the next meal prep. You leave the tent. The cold outside is cleaner than the warmth inside. You breathe air that hasn't passed through burning fat. Your lungs register the difference as relief so sharp it feels like pain. The families waiting in England have no knowledge of blubber smoke or seal soup or ice that moves 1.3 miles per day. They have last confirmed positions and expected return dates. Both are now obsolete. The historical record will say the Endurance was lost in November. It will not mention what came after unless the boats make it through. The canister remains where you left it. The smoke doesn't reach it. The smell doesn't touch it. The plates inside document faces taken in air that hadn't yet learned what 3 months of blubber smoke does to cloth, skin, and the baseline assumptions about what clean air means. The boats sit 30 yards from camp on ice that's held them for 94 days. McNish works on the James Caird, his hands moving across the deck seam where canvas meets timber. He's sealing joints that were already sealed. This is the fourth pass. The work past necessity now. The work ensuring that necessity never finds a gap. You approach. He doesn't look up. The canvas runs tight across the deck frame. No gaps. No buckle. The seal looks like something made in a workshop with proper tools instead of made on ice, with whatever stayed dry enough to use. Canvas is sealed, McNish said. Shackleton crosses from the command tent. His boots don't hurry. He stops beside the boat. Runs his hand along the deck seam, the same seam McNish just checked. His fingers trace the joint from bow to midship. Pressure testing. Feeling for weakness that inspection can't see. Good, he said. McNish stands. Wipes his hands on his coat. The gesture automatic. His hands are already clean. Shackleton moves to the Dudley docker. Checks the gunwale seal. The rudder mount. The places where modification meets original construction, and the joint has to hold against water that will find any failure point. You walk the line of boats. 3 vessels. 22 feet each. Designed to carry 6 men in calm water. About to carry 7, in whatever the Weddell Sea decides calm means today. The ice beneath them shows leads now. Open water visible 200 yards east. The crack that started as a pressure ridge 40 days ago has widened to a channel. The drift continues north. 1.3 miles per day. The gap between ice camp and water camp closing with the same inevitability that brought you here. A seal surfaces in the lead. Black head, dark eyes. It watches the camp for 3 seconds, then drops beneath. The water barely ripples. You've watched seals for 94 days. They never surface without reason. The lead is deep enough now to support hunting. Deep enough to support passage. Harry McNish's reputation was built in the dockyards of Portsmouth and Chatham. 12 years framing hulls that carried grain, wool, passengers. Ships that mattered because commerce mattered. The James Caird matters because 7 men will trust modified canvas and reinforced keel against 800 miles of open ocean. The work is the same, the stakes are not. Your kit sits in your tent. You checked it this morning, the canister beneath the shirt, the plates in their cases on top. The weight distribution, exactly as it was during the last inspection. Shackleton ordered final weight reduction yesterday. Every man, to 2 pounds of personal items. Medical supplies exempt. Navigation tools exempt. Photographic plates. He specified this. Allowed if they serve expedition documentation needs. The plates serve expedition documentation needs. The canister does not. The distinction matters in ways that 3 pounds of hidden metal will either justify, or fail to justify when the boats launch, and weight becomes the difference between floating and sinking. McNish returns to the James Caird, runs his hand along the seal one more time, the work complete. The checking continuing anyway because there's nothing else to check, and stopping means acknowledging that preparation has limits. The leads widen. The ice thins. The boats wait. The transition from ice to sea approaches with the patience of water that knows it will eventually reclaim everything. 5 months on ice have taught your body rhythms that will become useless in 48 hours. Ice time and sea time have different grammatical structures. You're about to learn a new tense. The camera equipment sits packed beside your tent. The plate cases are stacked in the order they'll load into the James Caird. Official documentation on top. The canister positioned beneath where Shackleton's hands won't reach during a visual inspection. You've checked the arrangement twice in the last hour. Not because it changed. Because tomorrow it won't be yours to check. McNish works 30 yards away, reinforcing the gunwales on the Dudley docker. The sound of his hammer carries across ice that no longer feels permanent. It held your weight for 147 days. Tomorrow it releases you. You stand outside your tent and watch the work. 28 men preparing 3 boats for a crossing that depends entirely on weather you can't predict, and ice conditions you can't control. Shackleton moves between the boats, checking lashings, testing canvas. He doesn't speak unless someone asks a question. The questions are technical, the answers are brief. Worsley emerges from his tent with the sextant. He takes a reading, makes a notation, returns inside. The routine hasn't changed, the meaning has. This is the last position he'll calculate from stable ice. You return to your tent and brew tea on the Primus stove. The blubber smoke doesn't bother you anymore. Your lungs learned it the same way your hands learned cold, through repetition that made sensation routine. The tea is ready when Crean walks past carrying a coil of rope. He nods, you nod back. The entire exchange takes 2 seconds and conveys exactly what it needs to convey. We're still here, we're still working, tomorrow we leave. The light shifts. Not dramatically. Antarctic light doesn't perform. It changes in increments so small you only notice them in retrospect, the way you only notice you've learned patience after you've already practiced it for months. You finish the tea and check the plate cases one more time. The canister sits exactly where you positioned it. 3 pounds of weight that serves no survival function, and which you will carry onto the boat tomorrow and protect through whatever conditions the Drake Passage decides are appropriate for 28 men in 3 open boats. The decision was made in 14 minutes in a flooding hold. The commitment is daily. Tomorrow it becomes hourly. McNish's hammer stops. You look up. He's examining his work with the focus of someone whose standards don't adjust for circumstances. The boat will either hold or it won't. His job is to make sure it holds. The calculation is clear. 3 boats, 28 men, open water that has taken better equipped expeditions than this one. The families waiting in England don't know where you are. The 22 men who'll stay on Elephant Island won't know if the James Caird reaches South Georgia. The historical record, if the plates are lost, will have photographs of the ship and the initial camp, but nothing of what came after. You pack the camera and secure the lens in its case. Tomorrow you'll document the launch if conditions permit. Tonight you sit in a tent on ice that taught you how to wait and understand that waiting was the preparation for whatever comes next. The wind picks up. Not enough to matter. Enough to notice. The James Caird sits at the ice edge. 22 feet of timber and canvas, reinforced by McNish over the last 6 days with materials salvaged from the wreck, and ingenuity that doesn't require explanation. Shackleton stands beside it. Load the essentials first, he says. Navigation equipment, medical supplies, then provisions. Worsley carries the sextant aboard. The chronometer follows. Then, the medical kit. The sequence is methodical. Each item placed where it serves a function, where weight distributes evenly, where retrieval doesn't require unpacking everything else. You carry the plate cases down to the ice edge. The official cases go into the James Caird stern locker. The canister stays positioned beneath the top case, exactly where it's been since you repacked at Ocean Camp. Nobody asks what's inside. The cases are labeled. The labels are sufficient. The Dudley Docker and Stancomb Wills load simultaneously. 28 men divided among 3 boats according to skills needed and weight balanced. McNish on the Docker. Crean on the Wills. Hussey's banjo goes aboard the Docker in a waterproof case that probably won't stay waterproof past the first wave. The provisions load last. Seal meat, blubber. Hardtack that survived 5 months on ice and will either survive the crossing or become a footnote in conditions that make survival optional. Shackleton checks each boat personally. He doesn't rush. He moves from bow to stern, testing lashings, examining seals, verifying that weight sits where it's supposed to sit. When he finishes with the James Caird, he moves to the Docker. Then the Wills. You stand at the ice edge and watch ice that held you for 147 days prepare to let go. The water moves beneath it, dark, immediate, indifferent to whether you cross it successfully or join everything else it's already claimed. The temperature drops as the wind shifts northeast. Your hands register it first, the specific cold that carries moisture, the kind that finds gaps in wool and stays there. You pull your mitts tighter. Around you, men make the same small adjustments without comment. 5 months have taught you to read weather through your skin. Prepare to launch, Shackleton says. The James Caird goes first, 6 men at the gunwales, lifting in unison, carrying it to the edge where ice meets water. The boat slides forward. The ice releases it. The water accepts it. You climb aboard with the plate cases secured, and the canister hidden, and the camera ready to document what happens next. The Dudley Docker launches. Then the Stancomb Wills, 3 boats on water that was solid ground this morning. 28 men leaving ice that became home because there wasn't another option. Shackleton takes the tiller, Worsley takes position at the bow, the oars deploy. The rhythm begins. Behind you the ice shelf catches the late sun. A surface that held tents, stoves, 28 men learning what endurance actually costs. 22 men will return here, wait here, depend entirely on 6 men reaching South Georgia, in a boat McNish reinforced with salvage and faith in joinery. The ice falls behind. Not quickly, water and distance work at their own pace, but it falls. 7 days. That's what Worsley estimated for the crossing from ice to Elephant Island. The estimate assumed weather within the range of terrible to impossible, and conditions that stayed just manageable enough to keep 3 open boats from capsizing. The first day gives you all of those things. The crossing takes 7 days through conditions that include what Worsley initially mistakes for a break in the clouds before realizing it's a wave. Water and sky occupy the same visual category, which simplifies the view and complicates everything else. The waves are large, not unexpectedly. The Drake Passage doesn't accommodate preferences, but large in a way that requires constant adjustment. Bailing, rowing, redistributing weight, as water comes over the gunwales and turns everything inside the boat into a question of what you can afford to lose. The plate cases stay lashed in the stern locker. The canister stays positioned beneath the top case. You check the lashings twice daily when conditions permit. When conditions don't permit, you trust that the knots you tied at launch are the knots that will hold until you can check them again. Worsley navigates by sextant when the sun appears. When it doesn't appear, he navigates by dead reckoning and professional instinct that doesn't explain itself, but which has kept you moving in approximately the right direction for 6 days. The James Caird rises, the wave passes beneath, the boat descends, the rhythm is constant. Your body learns it the way it learned ice, through repetition that makes sensation automatic. On the 4th day, the Stancomb Wills falls behind, not dangerously, but enough that Shackleton orders the James Caird to slow, and the Dudley Docker to adjust course. The 3 boats maintain visual contact because losing visual contact means losing the boat entirely. You don't photograph the crossing, the camera stays packed. Salt spray and glass plates don't coexist. The images that matter are the ones you'll take on solid ground, if you reach solid ground. The water is grey, the sky is grey. The distinction between them exists in theory. In practice they merge into a single field of grey that moves constantly and never resolves into anything you can navigate by except Worsley's calculations and the collective effort of 6 men rowing in shifts. The cold here differs from ice cold, wet cold. It finds seams in your clothing and stays, not sharp like wind cold, but persistent. Your fingers stiffen around the oars, despite motion that should keep them warm. Crean's breath comes in clouds that the wind takes before they fully form. Nobody mentions it. The body's complaints don't change the distance to Elephant Island. On the 7th day, the sky changes. Not to blue. To a slightly different shade of grey that suggests proximity to something that isn't water. Land, Worsley says. He doesn't point. There's nothing to point at yet. But his voice carries certainty that doesn't require visual confirmation. 4 hours later, Elephant Island appears. Land exists again. You step off the boat onto rock that doesn't move. Your legs remember the wrong rhythm. They expect the surface to drop, to rise, to shift beneath you. The rock stays where it is. The adjustment takes several seconds. Around you, men are kneeling on stones, some sitting, one lying flat with his arms spread. Nobody speaks. The sound of waves against rock is steady, repeating, predictable, in a way nothing has been for months. The canister is still in your kit. You checked it twice during the crossing, and once more when the boat grounded. The seal is intact. The plates inside survived 7 days of Drake Passage swells. You set the kit down on dry rock. The weight leaves your shoulders. That absence feels strange. Your body has learned to carry it, and now the carrying is done but the muscle memory remains. You leave the kit where it sits, and walk 15 feet to where the beach meets the cliff face. Behind you, someone is crying. You don't turn to see who. The thermometer in your pocket reads 4 degrees above freezing, warmer than the ice was. The wind is coming from the northwest, carrying salt spray. You taste it on your lips, and realize you'd stopped tasting salt somewhere in the middle of the crossing, your senses dulled by repetition, until the spray became invisible. McNish is sitting on a boulder 30 feet up the beach, not moving. His hands rest on his knees. He's looking at the cliff, not the water. You walk over. He doesn't look up when you approach. Boat held, you say. It did, McNish says. That's the whole exchange. You return to your kit. The canvas is damp, but not soaked. The buckles open smoothly. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, the camera case, and the plate holders. Beneath them, positioned exactly where you left it, the canister. You lift it out. 3 pounds of dead weight that serves no survival function. On ice, that weight was a liability balanced against discovery. On Elephant Island, the calculation shifts. Shackleton will inventory supplies again. He always does when establishing a new camp. But the urgency is different. The immediate danger is shelter, not weight. You rewrap the canister and place it back in the kit, then close the buckles. Shackleton is standing at the waterline with Worsley, both looking north. The direction the James Caird will go when it launches. 800 miles to South Georgia. You know this because Worsley has mentioned it 4 times in the last 3 days, each time with less explanation, as though repetition makes the distance manageable. One man has filled his pockets with stones. He walks 10 feet, empties them, returns to the beach, fills them again. He's done this 3 times since you landed. You watch him do it a 4th time. His face shows no expression. The action is mechanical, repetitive, possibly necessary. You don't ask him why. The camp will be here. Somewhere above the tide line, below the cliffs. 28 men, with supplies calculated to last until rescue arrives. How long that takes depends on whether the James Caird reaches South Georgia, and whether a rescue ship can return before winter closes the sea. You don't think about that timeline. The work now is inventory, shelter, routine, the same work as Ocean Camp, adjusted for rock instead of ice. Your job is documentation. Record the landing, the camp setup, the faces of men who just survived 7 days at sea, and who are now beginning the next phase of waiting. You retrieve the camera from your kit. The light is flat, overcast, good for portraits if anyone is willing to sit still long enough. Most aren't. They're moving, Checking supplies, staking positions for tents. One man is still kneeling on the beach. He hasn't moved in 5 minutes. You don't photograph him. McNish is reinforcing the James Card's keel with materials salvaged from the Stancombe Wills. The work takes 3 days. Shackleton has selected the 6-man crew, Worsley for navigation, Crean and McCarthy for seamanship, Vincent because he's strong, McNish because the boat is his and if it fails he should be there when it does, and Shackleton because the decision to go is his. The announcement is made at breakfast on the second day, no ceremony. Shackleton names the 6 men, states the departure date, returns to his tent. Shackleton selects 6 men for an 800-mile crossing in a 22-foot boat. The criteria aren't explained, which is either trust in his judgment or recognition that explaining won't help. You're not among the 6. Your work is here, documenting the weight, maintaining the photographic record. The plates justify their weight if they survive. If they don't, they were always just glass. McNish works without speaking. The modifications are technical. Decking the boat with canvas and wood scraps, raising the sides, creating enclosed shelter for the crew. You photograph the work in progress. McNish measuring, cutting, fitting. He doesn't acknowledge the camera. His focus is absolute. Wild will command the camp after Shackleton leaves. The 22 men on Elephant Island under his authority, waiting for rescue that may come in weeks or months. Supplies are inventoried daily, seal meat and penguin when available, blubber for fuel, the Primus stoves, carefully rationed. You repack your kit on the 3rd day. The camera, the plate holders, the remaining stock. Beneath them the canister, still wrapped, still sealed. Its weight is familiar now. You've carried it for 5 months without discovery. The hiding continues by habit. Shackleton hasn't asked to inspect personal kit since the landing, but the inspection could come at any moment. On the 4th day, the James Caird is ready. The boat sits at the waterline, decked and reinforced, loaded with supplies calculated for a 30-day crossing if conditions are average. Worsley's navigation charts are wrapped in oilcloth. The sextant is checked twice. You photograph the 6-man crew standing beside the boat. Shackleton in the center, Worsley to his right, the others arranged by height. The exposure takes 4 seconds. Nobody moves. When it's done, Shackleton nods once and turns back to the water. That evening you sit outside your tent with the canister beside you. The metal is cold against your palm. Inside, 38 portraits of men photographed before the Endurance sank. Images that document nothing useful for navigation or survival. Faces that might matter to someone later, if the plates survive and if you survive to deliver them. The decision to hide them was made in 14 minutes. The decision to keep carrying them has been remade every day since. Tomorrow, Shackleton leaves. The men remaining will wait. Your work is to document that waiting, and to protect a small archive of images that exist because you decided, once, that sentiment could justify its weight. The James Caird launches at dawn. 6 men, 30 days of supplies, 800 miles of open ocean. The boat clears the surf and turns north. You watch from the beach until it disappears into the swell. Wild stands beside you. He doesn't speak. After 5 minutes he turns and walks back to camp. The morning work begins. Inventory check, tent inspection, blubber stove maintenance. The 22 men on Elephant Island under his command now. You return to your tent and open the kit. The canister is where you left it. You lift it out and hold it for a moment, feeling its weight. 3 pounds. 38 images. The faces of men who may not survive the weight. You rewrap it and place it back in the kit. The weighting is different now. On ice, the weighting was motion. Drift, fracture, the constant adjustment to a surface that wouldn't hold still. Here, the rock doesn't move. The weighting is static. Each day the same. Wake, eat, work, sleep. The rhythm is protective. It fills time without requiring thought. Worsley estimated 4 months for rescue if the crossing succeeds and the weather holds. 4 months is 120 days. You don't count them. Counting makes the distance visible, and visibility makes it harder. Your work continues. Document the camp. Photograph the routine. Record the men's faces as the weeks pass. The plates are limited. You have 62 exposures remaining from the original stock, plus the 38 in the canister. Each photograph is calculated. No wasted images. On the third day after Shackleton's departure, Wild calls a camp meeting. He stands outside his tent and speaks for 2 minutes. His voice is level, factual. Rescue will come. The work is to wait correctly. No drama. No speeches. When he finishes, everyone returns to their tasks. You photograph him once, standing alone outside his tent. The exposure is clean. His face shows nothing. No hope, no doubt. Just the presence of a man doing a job that requires precision. The air smells different on the 4th day. Less salt, more stone dust. Wind from the east, rare for this coast. You notice because noticing is part of the documentation work. Record weather, light quality, visibility. Small facts that might matter when the plates are developed, if they're developed. If anyone cares about light quality, on Elephant Island, in April 1916. McNish carves something into a piece of driftwood outside his tent. You walk past twice but don't ask what. His hands move steadily. The knife is the same one he used for boat carpentry. The wood is pale, recently dried. One man has taken to walking the beach perimeter every morning. 42 paces north to the rocks, 118 paces south to the point where the cliff meets the water. You've watched him do it 6 times. His count doesn't vary. The route is exact. On the 7th morning you walk with him. He doesn't acknowledge your presence. At the southern point he stops, turns, walks back. You return to camp alone. The canister stays hidden. No inspections have been called. Your kit remains packed, the weight distributed as it has been for months. The hiding is automatic now. Check the seal, confirm the position, close the buckles. The routine is its own justification. At night you lie in your tent and listen to the sound of waves against rock. It's constant, rhythmic, more predictable than ice ever was. The sound doesn't teach patience, it demonstrates it. Each wave arrives and recedes. The rock remains. The shelter is 2 upturned boats braced against rock and sealed with canvas. 22 men inside. No movement expected for 30 days minimum, possibly longer depending on conditions. Shackleton encounters 800 miles north. You document the space with the camera. 4 exposures. The light through canvas creates a texture you haven't photographed before. Diffuse, amber, steady. Not the hard glare of ice. This is enclosed light. The plates sit in their case beside your sleeping bag. The canister beneath them. The weight hasn't changed, but the context has. On ice, weight was liability during movement. Here, weight is simply present. No inspections scheduled. No camps to break. The calculus has simplified. Wild boils penguin meat in a pot, salvaged from the Dudley Docker. The smell fills the shelter, dense, marine, not unpleasant after 6 months of seal and penguin as primary protein sources. You've stopped noticing the shift from revulsion to acceptance. The body adapts. How long do you reckon? Someone asks. Not directed at anyone specific. Long as it takes, another voice answers. The conversation ends there. Speculation serves no function. Shackleton left with Worsley, Crean, McCarthy, Vincent McNish. 6 men, 1 boat, 800 miles of the Drake Passage in autumn. Then, a mountain crossing on South Georgia that no one has mapped. Then, convincing a whaling station to send a ship back. 22 men wait under overturned boats for a rescue that depends on 6 men crossing 800 miles of the worst ocean on Earth. and then crossing unmapped mountains, and then convincing a whaling station to send a ship. Nobody discusses this. You return to your sleeping bag and check the canister by touch. Still there. Still sealed. 4 months on Elephant Island means time enough to think about every decision made in 14 minutes on October 27th. The plates you smashed. The plates you kept. The 38 faces you hid. The families waiting in England exist in a different mathematics now. Letters written months ago, carried in a boat that may or may not reach land. Distance measured not in miles, but in contingencies. Each family a weight distributed across the same 17 points of failure. Hussey plays the banjo near the entrance. Not a full song. Just a sequence of chords repeated until they become part of the shelter's ambient sound. After the third repetition, you stop hearing it as music. It becomes texture, like canvas light, like the smell of boiling penguin, like waiting. The rock beneath your sleeping bag holds cold the way glass holds images, constant. Transferring slowly into hip and shoulder. You shift position, and the cold finds new contact points. Someone coughs. The sound doesn't echo, canvas absorbs it. Outside, wind. Inside, stillness that has learned to hold its shape. Morning is light through canvas changing angle. You wake when the amber shifts to gray, which means the sun has moved behind the rock face that blocks the eastern approach. 4 months here. Waiting has stopped feeling like an interruption of work. Waiting is the work, the medium you exist in, like cold, like wind. A quality of presence that sits between resignation and hope, without requiring you to choose one. You make tea from melted snow. The ritual takes 11 minutes start to finish. Used to feel long. Now it feels correct. The body has learned ice time, where duration matters less than completion. Wild sorts through penguin bones outside the shelter, his movements economical, no excess motion. Everything on Elephant Island has compressed to necessity. You check the plate cases. The glass inside documents faces photographed in air that hadn't yet learned what blubber smoke does to fabric, what waiting does to posture, what 4 months on rock does to the assumption that rescue operates on schedules you can predict. The canister sits beneath, 3 pounds of unauthorized weight. On the ice it represented insubordination against survival mathematics. Here it represents something else, not defiance. Not sentiment, just the recognition that some weights justify themselves only after you've carried them long enough to understand what they preserve. The historical record sits distributed now, the plates you carry, the men you photographed. The families in England who will see these images or won't, depending on whether 6 men in a 22-foot boat can cross water that kills professionally. If the plates are lost, the expedition becomes testimony only, voices describing what happened, memory without witness. You lift the camera and check the lens. Salt spray from the boat launch left residue you've been cleaning in stages. Fine grit that catches light. You work it free with a cloth corner dampened with melted snow. Hussey's banjo rests against the wall. He hasn't played in 3 days. The silence feels earned, not empty. Outside, penguins. Inside, men who have stopped counting days and started counting the quality of stillness between one moment and the next. The canvas filters light, the cold filters time. What remains is presence without urgency. You lift the plate case and hold it. 20 pounds. Familiar. Your body knows this weight. The way it knows the weight of the camera. The weight of the tripod. The weight of decisions made quickly that echoes slowly. The plates inside are 16 you kept from the original 500. The ones that document the expedition's survival. The hull breaking. The camps on ice. The boats launching. Images that justify their inclusion by any standard Shackleton would accept. Beneath them, the canister. 38 plates that justify themselves differently. You set the case down and think about the ones you smashed on Weddell sea ice, the sound they made. Glass on ice. Sharp, brief, final. You thought about that sound every day for 7 months. Not regret exactly. More like accounting. Each plate smashed was a plate that couldn't be carried. Each plate kept was a choice about what matters when mathematics and memory conflict. 4 months on Elephant Island gives you too much time to think. The waiting has texture now. Not empty, not full, just present. The ice taught you this. That waiting isn't absence of action. It's a different kind of presence. The canvas overhead holds wind sound without letting wind through. You listen to the difference between pressure and penetration. Outside weather. Inside weather that has learned to stay outside. Harry McNish's reputation sits somewhere in the chain of contingency now. The carpenter who rebuilt the James Keatasian in conditions that shouldn't permit carpentry. If the boat fails, his work fails. If the boat succeeds, his work becomes the reason 28 men live instead of die. The judgment lives in wood joints and caulking compound and whether either holds in water cold enough to stop a heart in minutes. You think about weight again. Not the weight you carry. The weight others carry because you chose to preserve faces instead of eliminating them. Shackleton carries the weight of 27 men's survival. McNish carries the weight of one boat's integrity. You carry the weight of 38 exposures no one knows exist. Wild calls from outside. Penguin arriving. You leave the shelter and help with the kill. The work is automatic now. Blade, blood, butchering. Movements your hands know. When you return, the plate case sits exactly where you left it, the canister beneath, the weight steady. The horizon holds its line. 4 months of watching has taught you the difference between looking and seeing. Looking is effort. Seeing is what happens when the body stops trying to force the answer and lets the ice deliver it at its own pace. The canister is in your kit. It has been for 137 days. The plates you kept are stacked beside it. The ones you smashed are gone, but their weight remains. A kind of accounting your hands remember even when your mind moves past it. You don't know if the decision mattered. The waiting provides too much time for thinking. And thinking loops back on itself until the question becomes whether the question itself was the point. You carried unauthorized weight through 5 months on ice and 4 months on rock, because you believed documentation meant something beyond survival. Whether it does is a problem for later. Right now the work is watching the horizon and noting that it hasn't changed. The shelter behind you smells like blubber smoke and wet canvas. Bodies in close quarters develop their own climate. The air inside is warmer than the air outside, by exactly enough degrees to make the transition between them feel like crossing a threshold you can measure with your lungs. Someone is brewing tea. The sound is familiar. Metal on metal. Water beginning to hiss before it boils. These are the rhythms that replace urgency when urgency has nowhere left to go. Your fingers have gone numb against the rock where you sit. Not the sharp numbness that demands attention, but the slow kind that arrives when you've been still long enough for your body temperature and the stone's temperature to begin negotiating. You flex them once. The joints respond. That's all you need to know. Somewhere behind you, fabric rustles, canvas shifting as someone moves inside the shelter. The sound carries no meaning beyond presence. 22 men breathing in the same small space creates a kind of weather system. You've learned to read it the way you once read instruments. Pressure, temperature, the quality of air when too many lungs are working from the same supply. The families waiting in England don't know you're watching this horizon. They don't know the ship hasn't come. For them, the waiting has a different shape, one measured in silence and the absence of telegrams. Here, waiting has texture. Rock under your legs, wind against your face, the particular shade of grey the sky turns when it's holding weather, but hasn't decided what kind yet. The ice taught you something you didn't expect to learn. The only thing you can do about the present moment is be in it, not analyze it, not improve it. Just let it hold its shape while you hold yours. The horizon remains empty, you watch it anyway. The smoke doesn't bother you anymore. Blubber burns with a smell that used to feel like something you'd need to wash off later. Now it's baseline. The body adapts to what it can't change, and after months in the shelter, the smell is just what air smells like when 22 men share the same 12 feet of rock and canvas. You're sitting with your back against the boat hull, the canister is in your kit 3 feet to your left, you haven't checked it in days. It's there or it isn't. Checking won't change the answer, and the energy required to confirm what you already know is energy you've learned to conserve. The others are talking, but the words don't carry meaning the way they used to. Someone mentions weather, someone else mentions rations. The conversations are placeholders, sounds that confirm presence without requiring action. Your hands rest on your knees. The cold has worked its way into the joints, but it's a steady cold, not the kind that demands attention. Just the background hum of a body that has learned to function at a temperature slightly below optimal. The light through the canvas has gone soft. Evening approaches not as an event, but as a gradual dimming. The way color drains from fabric when you stop looking directly at it. Your breathing has slowed to match the rhythm of the space. Inhale. The shelter expands by the exact volume your lungs require. Exhale. It contracts again. The system balances itself without effort. Someone shifts position near the stove. The movement creates a small disturbance in the air. Warmth redistributing. Smoke curling a different direction. These are the variations that mark time when clocks have stopped mattering. You notice them the way you notice your own pulse. Confirmation of continuation, nothing more. Harry McNish's reputation will survive this or it won't. That question belongs to a future that hasn't arrived yet. The historical record is being written in the choices made now. In stillness. In the decision to keep watching a horizon that gives nothing back. But the record itself, whether anyone reads it, whether it justifies the weight you carried, is not a question for this moment. Outside, the wind moves across rock. Inside, breath and warmth collect against canvas. The boundary between the two is thinner than it was 4 months ago, but it holds. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is softer than the darkness outside. It doesn't press. It just waits. The way everything here waits. Until waiting stops feeling like an interruption, and starts feeling like the only available action. Being in the present moment is the only thing left to do. The ice made that clear, you're doing it now. The ship turns back. Ice prevents approach. You watch it happen from the shore. A shape on the horizon that grows larger, holds its position for 3 hours, then diminishes back into the line where water meets sky. No one speaks. There's nothing to say that the ice hasn't already said louder. This is the 4th attempt. The count matters only because counting gives structure to time that otherwise has no edges. Someone will try again. The only certainty is that trying doesn't guarantee arrival. You return to the shelter. The canister is where you left it. The plates are where you left them. Everything is exactly as it was this morning, which means the day's only event was confirmation that waiting continues. Your body knows this rhythm now. The effort that used to accompany disappointment has dulled into something flatter. Acceptance that isn't resignation, just recognition that the only thing to do with the present moment is be in it. The ice makes this very clear. You can't argue with ice. You can only let it teach you what it knows about patience, which is that patience isn't hope deferred. It's presence practiced, until presence becomes the whole answer. The ship is gone. The horizon is empty again. Tomorrow you'll watch it again, and the day after and the day after that, until watching stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like the work itself. The ship is visible. August 30th, 1916. 497 days since the Endurance went down. 128 days since Shackleton left Elephant Island with 5 men. And a boat reinforced by a carpenter who understood that survival is sometimes a question of 3 extra nails in exactly the right place. You stand on the shore. The others are already moving toward the water. Not running, because running requires energy no one has to spare, but moving with purpose that has been absent for months. Someone counts from the ship's rail. You can't hear the count, but you can see the gesture. One figure, then another, then another. The count is what matters. Not the condition of the men being counted, not the state of their supplies or the damage to their equipment, just the number. 22. The count reaches 22. The 22 men on Elephant Island, accounted for. All survived. The canister is in your kit, wrapped and sealed, carried through 497 days of ice and water and rock, because you decided, once, in 14 minutes in a flooding hold, that some weights justify themselves only in retrospect. The portraits inside are faces that might matter to people who don't yet know whether the men wearing them are coming home. Now they know. You don't retrieve the canister yet. There will be time for accounting later, time for inspections and inventories and the question of what was carried and why. For now the work is simpler. 22 men, counted and confirmed. Waiting, taught into presence. Presence held until presence was the only thing left. The ship comes closer. The waiting is over. You let yourself sleep.